Hey guys, how's it going? Well, while I wait for people to pile in, I'll tell a story about when I used to work for Tyson, and I worked in internal audit. And one of the things that we would do is inventory. We would make sure that they had all the inventory that they claimed to make. So one day we were supposed to do inventory on some supplies that they had in a truck, like an 18-wheeler truck. Just the container though, not the truck, but the container. Had a bunch of those containers, and they would store supplies in them. So I was like, okay, I need to see if you have all this packaging, all these boxes and stuff, and this trailer number. And the guy's like, okay, we'll back up the trailer into the bay and open it up for you. Like, okay. So then they back up the trailer, and then they open it up, and we look inside, and it's completely empty. There's nothing in there at all. And it's cardboard. It's not something super valuable, so it's not necessarily like a huge deal, but it's embarrassing for that guy. And he's like, maybe it's recorded incorrectly or something. Let me look into this. So, okay. So he goes and he looks into all of it. And he comes back, and it turns out that they have a paper recycling service they use, and they will use the same containers for the paper recycling services they use for storage. And it just so happened that one of the paper recycling containers had the exact same identification number as their storage container. It was like a 10-digit number or something like that. It just two separate companies, because they didn't own the paper storage one. The paper company owned that one, or the paper recycling one. The paper company owned that one. And it just so happened that the truck driver for the paper company came, looked for the trailer with the certain numbers on it, found a trailer with those numbers on it, and then hauled it off. Well, then at the gate, there's somebody who checks to make sure all this stuff is done correctly. So someone stops him at the gate, gets out the paperwork, verifies the trailer number is the same as the one he was supposed to pick up, and of course it matches. So then he drives off with all the cardboard that he wasn't supposed to. And by the time they figured out what it was too late. All it had been recycled. Thankfully, in that case, it was kind of old packaging that needed to be recycled anyway. And, it was all cardboard, so it wasn't like a huge loss either way. But I thought that was kind of funny how that turned out. Anyway, so today I'm going to be sharing some just what I've done this week. I can't share detailed specifics, obviously, because it's proprietary information with my company. But as far as the general sorts of things I'm doing and tools I'm using and all that. And then I'm also going to share just a few insights on data analytics in particular. And then I'm going to go over some news at the end if I have time. We'll see how this goes. So the insight I'd like to share is to anyone new in data analytics, or really new to any job that you're starting out. Sometimes what you're going to find is you're going to think that something's gone wrong. And what I would encourage you to do is don't panic and take the time to ensure there's actually a mistake. Don't go and tell anybody immediately about the mistake, unless it's a safety thing or you absolutely have to tell somebody immediately. But generally take a deep breath, examine the problem again, maybe walk away and come back. Because oftentimes when you're new to a field and you're still learning things, you'll often think something is wrong, or there's a big mistake, or maybe a small mistake you think is a huge mistake. And after you examine it again, you find out, oh, wait, actually, this is the way it's supposed to be. It's not an error. Or, oh, well, this is wrong, but it doesn't really have any impact. I can just fix it real quick and it will be good. I don't have to bother anybody about it. At least that was my experience when I started out. So if you're new, don't panic when something goes wrong. Make sure there's actually a mistake, because you don't want to panic other people, and you don't want a reputation for being someone who's easily panicked or something like that. And something that's true too is, as a senior data analyst, I make a lot of mistakes. I make them all the time, but most of the time nobody hears about it, and that's because I catch my own mistakes and I fix it and I go about my day, right? So don't think if you're starting out that uh, you're the only person making mistakes. Everybody's making mistakes. It's just the ones you may be making more, and they might be more obvious to other people, but don't sweat it. All right, so this week, what did I do? What did I get done? Well, I published a pipeline report. You might be asking what a pipeline report is. I don't know if every company uses the same terminology, but the way we define a pipeline report is you've got a process with a whole bunch of events. So the start of the process might be a customer calls you or something, and then you have a salesperson talk to the customer, and then you have a contract written up, and then it's signed, and then you have a duty to perform. You have to fulfill the contract, and then you fulfill it, and then you get paid, and so forth. Well, in that pipeline, what you're looking at is what's the drop off, and where are people falling out. So if we have a process where people have a form they have to enter all this information in, and they always stop at the same page on the form. Well, why is that, right? What is it about that page that's causing everybody to drop off? Is it asking personal information? Is there a bug on the page that's causing it to not work properly? All those kinds of things. So that's what a pipeline report does for you. It kind of helps you focus on the problem areas. Where are the big drop-offs in this procedure? What can we improve? Of course, you got to have a little bit of common sense, because sometimes there's just going to be a big drop-off, and that's how it is. If you're calling customers and you're like, wow, 90% of the people we call don't talk to us. It's like, well, that's not unusual. That's just kind of the name of the game. And you might be able to improve that a little bit. You might not. So I published a pipeline report this week. Then I had another problem with the report that was already published that was missing data, because there was the way it recorded data is it would have is active rows, and that'd be a positive value if that's the current row, because they might update it and you could have a bunch of rows in this table, but only one of them is applicable. And so to say which one actually applies, there'd be a column that says, oh, this is the active row. This is a value of 1. That's the active row. And turns out, though, that's not how it always is. Sometimes there are no active rows. And I did not realize that. So I had a report with a problem in it. I had to go and write a condition if that was the case, where there was no active rows for that customer. Then how was I going to still pick a row? Because I still have to have a row for this report. So that's another thing I did. And I realize a lot of this is kind of detailed and it might be boring, but if somebody's trying to get into data analytics and they want to know the sort of work that they'll be doing, hopefully I can give you a good insight into this. And for those people who are currently data analysts, maybe I can have some tips and tricks to share with you as we talk about these things. So then let's see, I had a new process where we had an existing procedure, and we were doing a new process that was very similar. So I was able to just copy an old procedure for the new process, but I had to go in and make a bunch of changes. So I did that, and that's still in testing. I'm not sure if that works 100% or not, but once I'm able to test it completely, I'll have a big head start on that. So that's good. Let's see, though, we had a problem with an API going down this week. So an API is where it's a data service you use with an external software. So if you're trying to get, say your sales team uses software that's external to what the rest of your company uses. Well, you might have an API that goes and grabs the data from a sales software and puts it in your company's database. That's what an API does. It goes and fetches data between softwares or between servers or databases, stuff like that. So one of our APIs went down. I did not fix that. Somebody else fixed that. But even though somebody else fixed that problem, I still had to manage the relationships with the people who needed that work. And they're asking me, when is this going to get fixed? And so forth. And I was working on a contingency plan. If we weren't able to get the API fixed in time for what they needed, then we could get that sorted out for them. Thankfully, the report, the API got working, so had everything they need, and somebody else already had the information they needed anyway. So I wasn't going to have to do much, but I had to manage the relationship there. So let's see. Then I had a request for some reporting, which was very simple. They just needed some fields that they didn't have. And that's something that's a really common request. That somebody has a report and they say, okay, I love this report, but I need these extra columns. I need a few more fields in here. And sometimes it turns out to be a huge task because there's not an easy way to get those fields. And you have to do a lot of complex querying, or you have to have some meetings to find out where it's captured, or maybe it's not even captured in a way that's appropriate for you to be able to report on it. And you have to meet with people and ask them to restructure how they store things or something like that. In this case, though, it was pretty easy. I was like, okay, I'll just add these 4 columns there and get it going. So that was nice. Today I created and published a report that shows some information, kind of geographical information. And that was good. Got to use a map, which is nice. I like to use maps. And that it was also kind of nice because it was pretty straightforward. Most of the time I'm not creating and publishing a report in the same day. It typically takes, anywhere from 1 week to several weeks to even longer if there's dependent processes that I have to, or somebody else has to create. But it's always nice when you're able to do something like that, when it's just kind of straightforward and just put in a report and like, okay, here you go. Here's what you need. So that was good. Yep. So that was my week. Might be pretty boring, but hopefully it's helpful to somebody out there. Now I wanted to go over a little bit of news and how it relates to data analysis. By the way, if there's anyone commenting here, I'm still trying to figure out how to see my comments. So sorry if I missed something there. But anyway, so kind of the news of the day, not really of the day, but just what's been going on is a lot of layoffs. So you just see on LinkedIn here, they've got on the LinkedIn news in the top right, they have layoffs latest, companies making cuts. You see Lyft is laying off 13% of its employees. Digital bank Chime is laying off 160 people. Digital payout Stripe is cutting 14% of its workforce. Hootsuite cut 5% of staff. Open Doors laying off 18% of the workforce. Or Oracle laid off as many 200 employees. And, this isn't just getting started. This has kind of been going on, but it'll probably continue. Zillow cut 300 jobs. Philips, Dutch technology giant Philips, cut 4,000 jobs. GoPuff cut 250, as many as 250 workers. Microsoft let go about 1,000 employees for multiple divisions. This is going on here. And how this relates to data analysis and tech is, if you're somebody who's trying to get into tech, or you're currently working a job in tech, you really got to realize it's kind of tough times right now. And you're going to have to be competing against other people, and you might have to compete to keep your job. It could turn out layoffs come to your company, and you're going to have to be good enough to keep your job or stick out enough. Sometimes it's, it's not always about how good you are. Sometimes it's about how well people know how well you're doing, if you're good at reporting that stuff and communication. And then, of course, sometimes it's completely out of your hands. It's just the department you were working for is cut or something like that. So if you're laid off, don't think it's necessarily your fault, or it can be seniority. There's so many different reasons. Anyway, all that to say, if you're looking for a job, or you're keeping your job, or you're worried about layoffs, have some advice. First advice for anyone who's looking to get into data analytics right now. And that is, a lot of these tech companies are having layoffs. And if you think about that, that means you have a lot of experienced people who are now looking for a job. And if you're a new person, you're going to be competing against experienced people in this field. So that really puts you at a disadvantage here. Now, there are some advantages to being new to the field. I mean, one is a lower salary, which I know doesn't sound like a good thing, but at times like this, it can be an advantage, because if companies are looking at their budgets for staff, and they're deciding between whether they hire an experienced analyst or a new analyst, that's a difference in salary. That can be tens of thousands of dollars of difference in salary. So that can be an advantage if you're willing to take that job, is they're going to be able to save tens of thousands of dollars potentially hiring a new data analyst versus a senior data analyst. Now, of course, the problem with that is the data analysts don't perform as well. They don't have the experience. So if you want to stick out as a data analyst applying for a job, you want to become proficient. You want to be in what the company is looking for. I see some advice sometimes on LinkedIn. I see mixed advice. You see some advice where it's like, okay, you got to develop this entire tech stack, where as a new analyst, you're expected to learn a lot about Excel, SQL, Tableau or Power BI, and then R and Python. And that's kind of your typical tech stack is those four. Well, that's a great tech stack. That is for sure. But the problem is, it's very hard to become proficient in all four of those tools at the same time. And if a company is looking to cut costs, and they're looking for an analyst like that, for an entry-level analyst, the one who is proficient in just the tools they need them for is the person they're going to hire. If they only need an analyst who knows SQL, they don't care if you know Python and all that stuff. They want you to know SQL very well. And if you know SQL very well, you're going to get the job ahead of somebody who knows SQL and Python and Power BI, but they don't know SQL as well as you do. And that can be true of a lot of different softwares. You really want to be proficient at least one tool, if not multiple tools, but don't try to tackle four things at once and do it that way. And then if you currently have a job, I don't necessarily not the greatest person to give advice here, but always be looking for ways, or look for ways to add value, but mostly focus on how well you're communicating and you're prioritizing, because what you want to be doing is getting tasks that are really important to the business. You don't want to necessarily just be focusing on whatever the latest request is and the most urgent ask is, because if people are looking around the company and they're saying, okay, who are we going to cut? You want them to think, well, we can't cut this guy because he's working on these critical tasks, or he's delivered us all this great value. Now, if you're a great worker who is very proficient and is efficient in his job, but what you're getting done is a bunch of tasks that are helpful to individuals within the company, but don't add a lot to the bottom line of the company, that's not a good position to be in if layoffs come. So that's something to think about. Obviously, that can be outside of your control, but if you can, just always make sure you're thinking about, how does this help the company as a whole, and not just particular individuals. Anyway, so that's what I had for today. Let me check here and see if I've got any comments or any questions to answer. I'm still learning how to do all this live streaming stuff, so it's hard for me sometimes to see. Okay. All right. No questions. All right. Well, y'all have a great week. I think I'll be doing this again next Thursday night. I was hoping to do these at lunchtime, but I thought about it, and that's generally just a little bit too hectic of a time because I've got to eat lunch, and during the day there might be something urgent at work that comes up, and then I don't want to have to cancel this last minute or do the stream anyway, and then always have in the back of my mind that something urgent at work that I actually have to get done. So I'll be doing these Thursday nights at 7 p.m. It might not be the best time, but it works out for me. So anyway, see y'all next week.